Picture this. You're at a dinner party, the vibe is great, the food is fantastic, and then someone says, "Oh, by the way, I'm the one who prints all the money everyone here uses." At first, everyone laughs. That's adorable, right? But then you realize, no, they're serious. They really do print all the money. And not only that, they decide who gets to use it, and if they don't like you, you're suddenly paying for dessert with monopoly bills. Well, that's more or less the US dollar's role in the global economy. For decades, it's been the host of the party, the one pouring drinks, picking the music, and if it feels like it, telling you to leave. But lately, a few guests have started whispering in the kitchen, maybe we don't need this party anymore. Maybe we could throw our own. That's where our story begins. And trust me, when the money map changes, it's not just bankers and politicians who feel it. It's you, me, and everyone who buys a cup of coffee. So let's dive into what happens when the world starts asking if the dollar should still be king. 5 countries. One mission: dethrone the US dollar. Not with dramatic overnight coups or blockbuster plot twists, but through the slow, calculated, and highly political chess match of international finance. The BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is challenging a monetary order that has been in place since 1944, and they are doing it for reasons that go far beyond economics. At its core, this is a revolt against a system where one nation, the United States, gets to issue the currency the rest of the world needs, while running trade deficits and paying for imports with promises everyone treats like gold. This is not a natural law of economics. It's a carefully built power structure. And like all power structures, it lasts only as long as enough people agree to play by its rules. The dollar's role as the world's reserve currency began at Bretton Woods in 1944. Back then, much of Europe and Asia lay in ruins after World War II, and the US controlled the majority of the world's gold reserves. The deal was simple. Other countries pegged their currencies to the dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. It gave the dollar global stability and credibility. Even after President Nixon closed the gold window in 1971, ending the dollar's direct convertibility to gold, the habit stuck. Global trade kept using dollars because the systems, markets, and trust were already in place. That trust comes with privileges. The US can run large trade deficits without worrying about a currency collapse because other nations need dollars for their own trade and as reserves. It can borrow cheaply because global demand for treasuries remains high. And it can print more dollars to pay for imports, military spending, or stimulus packages, knowing the rest of the world will absorb them. But there's a flip side: control. With the dollar at the center of global finance, the US can decide who gets access to the system. This is where sanctions come in. The US Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control has built a formidable toolkit that can cut banks, companies, or even entire nations out of the dollar network. In the 1990s, these measures were relatively rare and targeted. By the 2020s, sanctions had become a central pillar of US foreign policy, applied to dozens of countries and hundreds of entities. That escalation hasn't gone unnoticed. For BRICS, the implications are personal. China holds over $800 billion in US treasuries, effectively lending Washington money it can repay in dollars created at will. Russia learned the hard way in 2022 what happens when your reserves are in a rival's currency. You can wake up one morning and find $300 billion of them frozen. Brazil, India, and South Africa might have better relations with the US, but they still understand the risk of tying their economic lifelines to a single politically charged currency. So the strategy unfolds on multiple fronts. First, bilateral trade in local currencies. India pays Russia for oil in rupees. China buys Brazilian soybeans in yuan. Every transaction like that is one less that passes through the dollar's hands. Second, alternative payment networks. Russia's SPFS and China's CIPS are not as big or fast as SWIFT, but they're designed to be immune from US political pressure. Third, and this is the boldest move, a possible BRICS currency, potentially backed by gold or a mix of commodities, designed to inspire confidence and resist manipulation. There's precedent for such moves. The euro was designed to rival the dollar and now makes up roughly 20% of global reserves. It took decades of economic integration and political commitment to get there, and even now it hasn't dethroned the dollar. That's partly because reserve currencies are about more than trade volume. They require open, transparent, and trusted financial markets, consistent rule of law, and a track record of stability. Things that some BRICS members still struggle to provide. It's not just about credibility. The BRICS nations have vastly different political systems, economic models, and even rivalries with one another. China and India have unresolved border disputes. Brazil's economy is tied to Western markets. South Africa's political environment can be volatile. Building a common currency in this context would be like forming a band where the drummer plays jazz, the guitarist plays heavy metal, and the singer only shows up every other rehearsal. Yet, this isn't an all-or-nothing game. The dollar doesn't have to collapse for its influence to weaken. If more global trade shifts to other currencies, if more central banks diversify into gold or alternative assets, if more payment networks bypass US oversight, the dollar's share of global reserves could shrink over time. That erosion would chip away at America's ability to finance deficits cheaply and project economic power through sanctions. The consequences at home could be significant. A weaker dollar means imports cost more. Electronics, cars, raw materials. Higher import costs push inflation up, which pressures the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates. Higher rates make borrowing more expensive for households, businesses, and the government. That's when the US would have to make real fiscal choices. Less print and spend, more tax and cut. Globally, the shift would redistribute influence. Countries less dependent on the dollar would have more freedom to defy US policy without fear of financial strangulation. Trade blocs might start pricing key commodities, like oil, in multiple currencies. Regional powers could set their own financial rules, making the global economy more fragmented. But this is not a smooth or predictable process. The dollar is deeply embedded in global finance. Even countries frustrated with US dominance often prefer the dollar's stability to the uncertainty of alternatives. If you're a central bank managing billions in reserves, you want a currency with deep, liquid markets that you can move in and out of instantly. Something the dollar provides better than anyone else. For now, the dollar remains king, but it's a king with more challenges than ever before. BRICS doesn't need to overthrow it in one dramatic move. It just needs to keep building alternatives until enough of the world sees the dollar as optional rather than mandatory. That's when the real shift begins. The bigger question isn't whether BRICS can break the dollar's dominance. It's what the world will look like if they succeed. Will we get a more balanced, multipolar financial system that's fairer and more resilient? Or will we end up with competing blocs, fragmented markets, and higher transaction costs that slow global growth? Either way, the days of unquestioned dollar supremacy are numbered. And if history teaches anything, it's that when the money map changes, the world changes with it. We're not watching a one-act drama here. We're watching the opening moves of a long, complicated game. The only certainty is that everyone, whether in Washington, Beijing, Sao Paulo, or your local grocery store, will feel the effects when the pieces start to move. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more quality content like this one.